Let me actually get the link. Where's meeting info? There we go. Copy link. There we go. All right.
Got it.
How close does this thing have to be?
No, close.
Okay. Or Slack, I guess. Yeah, so it turns out I forgot to send the Zoom link to my actual committee. So Eddie is currently getting the link.
There is a link on the.
Oh, that's true. I might have invited Eddie to that, yeah.
Let's see this. Okay, he says, I'm so sorry. Well, no worries.
All right.
Let's see.
I mean, Eddie should pop up here, right? It's in alphabetical order.
Probably.
Oh, oh, Eddie. No, Eddie yet. It is alphabetical. So, oh, someone just joined. No, that's not him. Come on, Eddie. Hey.
See other people still dropping in.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries if any of you have to leave by 11 or something. I know there are a lot of meetings going on, but I'll try to get to the best part before then, which is when a lot of you might show up.
You should be ready.
All right. Yay, Eddie's here. Okay, cool.
Good, good, good.
Great. All right.
Oh yeah, let me all right, well, we're finally going to start, or really officially start, Lily's Thesis defense. I see a whole bunch of new faces here that I don't normally recognize, so welcome to MIT, and all the people online, welcome, family and friends. This is a great moment, right? Like maybe, Thesis has a draft of the thesis has been written, all the experiments have been done, years of work, have gone into it. And so it's a major, major accomplishment. And so there's a sort of big moment of, joy. Also, a little bit of, sadness from my side. I've been working with Lily for many, many, many years. And this basically is a signal of the end of that collaboration, because we will move on and probably do even better things than she's done here at MIT. We worked on a whole bunch of different topics over the years. We worked on extending variations of the cumulativity rule. We worked on a Rust OS kernel, multi-core stuff. We worked on systems verification, and but then and Lily always has lots of ideas. You probably know her better than some of you might know her probably better than I do. She's a lot of energetic, a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions. In fact, so many ideas and suggestions that she needed multiple advisors. I just couldn't keep up. So in fact, she has 3 advisors, not even 2. So Malta's there, who's actually an advisor, and then Eddie, who's online, also has been involved as an advisor from the get-go, even when you were an undergrad at Harvard. So a whole team of people, just to keep up, with Lily. The thesis is none of the topics that we worked on initially. And in fact, it's a very different topic, and a topic that she's very passionate about, privacy, using data disguising. And so we'll talk about it in this talk. You probably also know that Lily has another big passion other than research, which is music. And then she has joy for the community, and doing the performances all over. And so that's been fantastic, to have you around for that too. But I think the talk, is not going to be about your second passion or first passion. I don't actually know what the order is, but it's going to be about the research work. And Lily, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Franz, for such a great introduction. I'm so grateful today to welcome you to my thesis defense. And, thank you for being here virtually or physically and from across the globe. So today I'll be discussing the need for new systems for flexible user privacy and how we can achieve this type of privacy via disguising and revealing. Throughout this talk, I'm also happy to take questions and I'll monitor the chat, and there'll also be a dedicated time for questions at the end. So I'll start by illustrating what I mean by flexible privacy with the example of, Twitter. So many of you here might have Twitter accounts, and like me, you may have considered leaving at some point. Like many users, you might have found leaving to be a tricky decision. You could have deleted your account, like some high-profile users did, even though you may have wanted the option to come back. In doing so, you prevent Twitter from accessing your sensitive data, but you also permanently lose your millions of followers. Or you could have left your account up like some other users, but this unfortunately lets Twitter retain access to your data, including your private messages and search history. Beyond just this Twitter example, users want more control over their data. On dating apps, for example, users come and go, and they want their very sensitive data protected while they're not using the application. And users on Reddit or Instagram went to the efforts to manually create and manage throwaway or anonymous accounts. Throwaways dissociate data that users want to separate from their main account. For example, a post about medical questions that they don't want people to associate with their identity. These examples point to the need for more than just simple account deletion, for the ability to time out the data of inactive accounts and to dissociate data into anonymous throwaways. And removing data access is not enough. Users should be able to revive their hidden accounts and manage their throwaways. We capture this in-between state of users where they're not quite gone because they can return, but they're also not quite there because the application cannot access their private data, with a new abstraction of disguised data. Between the time that data is disguised and the time a user later reveals it, the actual user data is inaccessible to the application, and some of it is replaced by placeholder data in the application to keep the application data structure intact. So for example, if a user removes a post with comments, a placeholder post would maintain the comment thread structure. And flexible privacy doesn't just better reflect users' changing privacy needs. It can also help web services. With flexible privacy, these services reduce their liability in face of a data breach. They can more easily comply with a growing number of privacy regulations like the GDPR, and they can appeal to users by supporting the privacy features that they want. So it's clear that users want more fine-grained and flexible controls over their data, and services have incentives to support these controls too. So why don't developers actually implement what users want? Well, first, developers had no clear definition of what this in-between state of data would be. But even with disguised data as an explicit goal, developers still face several challenges. First, the last thing any developer wants to do is break their application, and disguising can be particularly error-prone. For example, let's take a user Bob here, who has a shared message with Helen and some health posts. And I'll say that Bob wants to disguise his account. Disguising would remove Bob's account entry, but have to deal with maintaining referential integrity by introducing placeholder data. So developers must make sure to carefully remove the correct data and introduce the correct placeholders. Disguised data may also introduce challenges of composition. One composition challenge is that disguised data can be disguised again. For example, let's say a developer of a Reddit-like application wants to support both users creating throwaways and also them temporarily removing their accounts. And let's say again that Bob has one post. Bob might then create a throwaway. So their post is dissociated from their account and reassociated with some placeholder user. And then Bob might later want to remove their account and all their data, even their throwaways data. So no data is left in the application database. To support this, the developer must determine which posts of which throwaway users belong to Bob in order to remove them. But this should be impossible because the whole point of a throwaway disguise is that there should be nothing accessible to the application that lets it determine the link between the anonymous dog and Bob. And because data can be disguised multiple times, it can also be revealed multiple times and not necessarily in the same order, as I'll demonstrate a bit later. So you can imagine how difficult it would be for a developer to implement these semantics correctly. The third challenge is raised by the inherent trade-off between security and practicality. In order to be secure, disguised data should be confidential or inaccessible to the application between the time of disguise and the time of reveal. And this is under the assumption that developers are trusted, clients aren't compromised, and external data copies, such as screenshots, are out of scope. One strawman solution that achieves the security would just throw the data away. But this means that the data isn't around and can't be revealed. So the developer needs to find a way to keep it around while still making it inaccessible to the application. But if the developer stores the data, users need some way to reveal it. And revealing would require some form of credential because users need to prove that they own the data. But users are notoriously forgetful, and the developer wants to make it easy for them to return. Finally, allowing users to reveal their data also adds a unique challenge. How should the developer reveal disguised data if the database has since been globally updated? So for example, let's say that Bob has a post that has a bad word in it. And then they disguise their account so the data is inaccessible to the application. The developer might then want to apply a kid-friendly filter that removes all bad words from posts. But this moderation would fail to affect Bob's post because it's disguised. So if Bob later wants to reveal their account, their post would not reflect the moderation and be both incorrect and kid-unfriendly. So the developer needs some way to remember these global database updates, which can include schema changes, which can include schema changes and data transformations like reformatting content or moderating content. And then they must correctly apply these updates to disguised data before revealing it. So today I'll demonstrate how the notion of flexible privacy through disguised data is possible despite these challenges with Edna. Edna is a disguising and revealing library that works with existing web applications to automate disguising and revealing and makes developers' lives easier. I'll start by discussing how Edna allows developers to write disguise specifications with 3 composable primitives, and how Edna solves the challenges facing disguising and revealing with a set of techniques, namely pseudo-principles or anonymous principles as placeholder data, reveal credentials which allow users to reveal disguised data, speaks for and diff records that store encrypted disguised data, speaks for chains which allow disguises to compose, and reveal time update specifications, which allow Edna to reveal in the presence of global database updates. I'll also present an evaluation of Edna with 3 real-world applications, and Edna is open source at the link below if you want to check Edna out. So to show you what Edna supports, let's actually see a real web application with support from Edna for disguising and revealing. This is a locally running version of Lobsters, which is an open source link sharing discussion forum similar to Reddit or Hacker News. And Lobsters today has over 16,000 users. For clarity in this demo, I've only generated a couple posts and comments. So here we can see that I've made some, You can see that I've made some health posts, and you can also see that I've made some budget posts. And I have an account under the username Lily T that the settings are in the corner. All right, let's see what content that I have posted as Lily on this application. And so under a health post, I've made some comments about how I love the quiche and I like the lactose-free version. So this could potentially be leaking sensitive information about maybe I'm diabetic or maybe I'm lactose-free from the link of my account to these comments. And I've also made some posts, some comment on a budget post about whether grad students can also save $20 in their 20s. So now let's say that I realize that my health comments are actually quite sensitive. And I don't want my insurance company, for example, finding out that I might have health problems. So I can go to the Lobsters account settings page. And these are just the normal account settings page of the Lobsters application you'll see today. Except in this case, the developer has added a form that allows me to create a throwaway. And so in particular, all I have to do is type in which throwaway I want to create, in this case, a health throwaway, and my password. And when I submit the form, the developer has added a hook into Edna. And so under the hood, Edna is taking this information and creating a throwaway for a health throwaway for me. And this data, this link to this throwaway is encrypted by Edna so that the application does not know that I own this throwaway. Edna also emails me a token in the form of a URL that allows me to reveal this data later if I want. So Edna's doing all of that, and I'm retrieving the token just in case I want it later. So now let's see what actually happened. So if we look at my health post again, we see that my comments have indeed been dissociated to some anonymous throwaway. And in this case, the developer has decided that the same throwaway should own all my comments in the same thread. And this makes sense because it allows other users to know who responded to what in the comment thread. And then if we go look at my budget post, we should see that it is still associated with my account. So I've only created a health throwaway. All right, now let's say that I want to take a break from social media. And so I want to remove my Lobsters account. Again, I go to the settings page and I see that the developer has added a disguise account form. And here, again, all I have to do is input my password and click the button, and under the hood, the developer has added a hook to Edna that allows Edna to disguise my account, encrypt all my data, remove it from the database, and send me a token that allows me to reveal it if I later want. So now, if we go look at the actual content, we see that my comments have been removed. And in addition, I have been logged out of my account because I no longer have one. And we see the same results for my budget comments. Okay, so now let's say I decide I actually do want some entertainment, and so I want to come back to Lobsters. So I go and find that URL in my email, and I'm going to go navigate to it here. Yes. And so this URL encodes the token that, combined with my password, allows Edna to decrypt and restore my data to the database, to the application. And so I just put in my password, which is super secure, and I reveal my account. And now when we look at my comments, they're indeed back. But importantly, they're back still under a throwaway account because I haven't revealed my throwaway disguise. And if we go look at my budget comments, they should just be restored and reassociate with my account. So this is just a couple of the disguises that we support. We also support an inactive account disguise where if I don't log into Lobsters in 30 days, it'll automatically dissociate my account. So create throwaways for all my comments and posts. And then we also support multiple throwaways, composing all these disguises and revealing them in arbitrary orders. So let's actually see how Edna does this. First, we'll look at Edna's design, and in particular, how developers use Edna. The developer links Edna as a library in their application and adds hooks to invoke Edna's API, as you saw in the Lobsters forms. They add specifications for each disguise, like throwaways or account removal, that they want to support. A developer writes a disguise specification using 3 primitives: remove data, modify data, or decorrelate it from the owning user, where the data is chosen by a provided predicate. Developers only need to think about disguises on this level of disguise specification, and these primitives allow for a wide range of disguises to be expressed. This is also a one-off setup, so the developer doesn't need to continuously think about disguising and revealing. As an example specification, say the developer of Lobsters, like a Reddit-like application, wants to support creating throwaways. A developer simply has to specify the table, in this case, posts, the type of primitive operation, decorrelate, which dissociates data from the owner, and a predicate on the tag, which will be instantiated to be the topic to throw away when the client invokes the hook. So if you recall, I inputted health into the form, and that would be instantiating this disguise specification. So next, let's look at how clients use Edna. Edna introduces the notion of reveal credentials. And reveal credentials allow users to reveal their data. Credentials can be a private key of a client's key pair, but for usability, Edna also supports using the user's passwords or a backup token as credentials. Clients register accounts with Edna by providing their public key. And this is usually done when they create an account with the application. Finally, let's look at how Edna's design solves the challenges set out in the beginning. So if you recall, the first challenge was how to disguise and reveal without breaking the application. To do this, Edna uses pseudo principles, which serve as Edna's way to implement placeholder data. They let users dissociate data and create throwaways without breaking the application. So in this example, Bob instantiates the throwaway disguise specification to decorrelate all health posts from their account. This causes Edna to automatically generate pseudo principles to maintain referential integrity. Pseudo principles, as we saw, can be decorrelated at different granularities. For example, every data object could dissociate and reassociate to a unique pseudo principle, or all comments in the same thread can be decorrelated to one pseudo principle to preserve reply structure, which is what we saw in the Lobsters demo. Edna also supports default semantics for removal of shared data. At a high level, Edna supports the notion of joint ownership, where users should retain access to data even if they only have partial ownership. And data is only removed once all references to all owners have been disguised. So for example, let's say that Helen and Bob, again, have a shared message. And let's say that Bob wants to disguise their account and remove the message. Because Helen has partial ownership of the message should still be accessible to Helen. But because Bob has disguised their account, Bob is replaced by a placeholder dog. When Helen disguises their account, the message is actually removed because all owners have disguised and there are no longer any references to the message. Now let's say that one of the two owners wants to come back, and to make it more interesting, let's say that Bob wants to come back first. So again, Bob has partial ownership of the message and should be able to see it, but Helen should be disguised. So Helen appears as some anonymous pig. And when Helen decides to reveal their account, we're back to the beginning. So these semantics are a choice that's made by Edna, and it's inspired by common semantics in web applications like Twitter and Facebook today. Other alternatives might also be possible. When Edna performs the disguise, Edna creates disguised data, which is stored in the application database. Disguised data is made of two types of encrypted records. So here, if Edna creates Bob's throwaway account, Edna will store a speaks for record that proves that Bob can speak for or act as the anonymous dog. Bob can later unlock this record to act as the anonymous dog to, for example, edit their post. Edna also stores a diff record, which stores the actual data change. In this case, that's rewriting a foreign key of the post to point to anonymous dog. And as we'll see, this will let Bob reclaim their health post. Both of these records are locked by encryption with Bob's public key. When Bob actually wants to reveal their disguised data, that's where reveal credentials come in. So let's say that Bob wants to reclaim ownership of their health post. Bob would then give their reveal credential to the application in Edna to unlock their disguised data. Edna can then use the information stored in the records to restore ownership of health post to Bob and remove the pseudo principal. And once the revealing is over, Edna forgets Bob's disguised data and credentials. However, Edna can't just naively reveal data, as doing so may overwrite existing application updates or violate referential integrity. So Edna performs a set of consistency checks for these scenarios and only reveals data if these checks pass. Next, let's see how Edna solves the challenge of disguise composition. So speaks for records and reveal credentials also allow Edna to compose disguises. Recall the scenario where Bob wanted to remove their account after creating a throwaway. In this case, Edna has to somehow discover Bob's dissociated data in order to remove it. Edna supports this composition by allowing clients to also provide their reveal credential when they invoke a disguise. Edna can then unlock Bob's disguised data, and in particular, Bob speaks for a record, and use this to find and remove all of Bob's data, including health posts. And when removing this data, Edna will generate diff records for this remove account disguise, which allows Bob to later reveal their account if they wish. And finally, Edna will forget Bob's reveal credential. Edna solves the problem of out-of-order reveals with speaks for chains. So now let's see an example of how reveals could happen out of order with multiple throwaways. At the top in the green box, we see the current speaks for chain held in Edna's disguised data for Bob, and this starts out as just Bob. For simplicity, I'm not going to show the creation of disguise records right now. So let's say that Bob first creates a health throwaway, and Edna creates anonymous dog as the placeholder pseudo principal. Edna will also store a speaks for link from the dog to Bob. Then when Bob creates a budgeting throwaway, Edna creates an anonymous pig and adds another link to the speaks for chain. This speaks for chain will also be encrypted under Bob's public key. Now let's see what happens when Bob tries to reveal their throwaways, but out of order. So recall that the health throwaway was created first, and then the budget throwaway. But Bob maybe wants to first reveal the first disguise, namely the health throwaway. Edna knows that the dog is the owner of the health throwaway and created by the disguise. But Edna can't reveal the dog because the dog doesn't exist in the database. And second, Bob's post should still be disguised under the budget throwaway. What Edna will do is delete the link to the dog in the speaks for chain and relink Bob directly to anonymous pig. So in the database, the post is still owned by the anonymous pig, the budget throwaway. Now, when Bob reveals the budget throwaway, Edna finds the associated pseudo-principal, namely the anonymous pig, and knows which principal should now own the data, which is Bob. Edna must also tackle the third challenge of confidentiality versus practicality. Oops, let me mouse off this. Okay. Between the time that data is disguised and the time a user reveals it, and under Edna's threat model, Edna's design provides confidentiality of disguised data by encryption with the user's public key, and of disguised data ownership, because Edna stores disguised data at a layer of interaction at a per user, per disguised encrypted index. This index lets users tell Edna where to find their disguised data without Edna having to store an explicit link from the disguised data to the user's identifiers. Neither the application nor Edna has the keys to decrypt disguised data or these encrypted indices. And thus, Edna provides GDPR-compliant crypto shredding of data. The prototype uses Shamir secret sharing in conjunction with a password-based key derivation function to allow users to use their passwords or a backup token as reveal credentials. To briefly explain our scheme, Shamir secret sharing of the user's private key will generate 3 shares from the key. And in a 2-3 secret sharing scheme, we need 2 of these shares to rederive the private key. So the first share is used as a backup token and given to the user or some third party. The second share is stored by Edna. And the third share is partially generated from the user's password and username using the password-based key derivation function. And Edna stores the other half of this password-derived share. So this means that Edna can derive 2 full shares and thus the secret private key from the user's password. So users don't have to worry about key management. Or if the user forgets their password, they can use their backup token. Shamir secret sharing is just one way of implementing such password-based authorization. We could also imagine alternative schemes such as encrypting the private key and indexing by a hash of the password. So we also know that this is a measure done for usability and not security, because the security of the scheme is the same as the security of the user's password, which we see can vary. However, this confidentiality does come with some limitations, because Edna's design chooses to prioritize usability when tackling the inherent security usability trade-offs. For example, decorrelation is key to enabling fine-grained and flexible disguises, but it also leaves placeholder data available to attackers. And metadata, such as the size of disguised data, is left behind because Edna utilizes server-side storage to hold disguised data in order to avoid burdening users with data storage management. Finally, let's look at how Edna tackles the 4th challenge of disguising and revealing correctly, even in the presence of global database changes, such as schema changes and content updates. So recall that if Bob has a health post with some bad word in it, and then wants to remove their account, then Edna will remove the health post and create a diff record that's encrypted for this removed health post. Say the developer then comes around to make the site kid-friendly with a global update that moderates swear words. But because Bob's data is locked away and disguised, the developer cannot modify it. So instead, Edna enables the developer to provide a reveal time update specification that reflects the kid-friendly moderation. The developer gives this reveal time specification to Edna by invoking Edna's API, and Edna stores this specification with multiple other such reveal time updates, which are organized in chronological order in a replay log. When Bob wants to then reveal their account, they give permission to Edna to unlock and decrypt their data. Edna can't just reveal this data though, because the developer has explicitly said that a reveal time update namely swear word moderation, should apply. So before Edna reveals the data, Edna will copy the data from the diff record into memory, and then go through the replay log to find all the reveal time updates that occurred since Bob's disguise. Edna then applies them in chronological order. So in this case, Edna applies the swear word moderation to the diff record data. Only then does Edna actually reveal it in the application database. So when the post is restored to the application, it ends up in a kid-friendly, updated state. And after revealing, like before, Edna will clean up the old disguise data. So we've seen Edna's design, and next I'll briefly describe Edna's prototype implementation. The prototype's written in Rust and works with relational databases. And in particular, it supports MySQL. It does have a couple assumptions that rows to disguise have direct foreign key relationships to at least one user, and that these rows can be uniquely identified, for example, via primary key. However, these constraints aren't fundamental, as I'll discuss in some future directions. We use a standard Diffie-Hellman ephemeral key exchange to generate secrets to encrypt disguise data. And the exchange uses the user's public key and an ephemeral key pair generated by Edna. Next, I'll dive into some experiments and case studies that we did with Edna. We first evaluated Edna by asking whether Edna can actually work with existing applications. And so the demo was a bit of a giveaway, but to answer this question, we looked at lobsters in particular. And as we saw with Edna, lobsters can support all three of the data controls mentioned, namely throwaways, data timeout, and account removal. And it gives users the option to reveal or edit their disguised data. This is done without changing Lobster's database structure and simply requires the developer to add JSON specifications and application hooks that instantiate these specifications and invoke Edna. As you can see, they're quite straightforward to write, and in total added less than 0.5% to the Lobster's code base. And most of these changes were to add the UI elements to support these hooks that you saw in the forms on the demo. We also implemented 2 disguising transformations, each in HotCrab, which is a conference review platform, and Web Summit, which is a homework submission site. And we saw similar results. We next investigated whether Edna's disguise and reveal operations affect normal application performance. So Edna adds no direct extra work to existing application operations, but because Edna does consume resources, there can be indirect impacts due to the added contention. To test these impacts, we evaluated both low and high load scenarios on the x-axis with application operation throughput on the y-axis. And as a baseline, we run a typical Lobster's client workload without Edna. We then run the same workload with Edna constantly in disguising and revealing a randomly selected user. And so we see here that both under high and low load, disguising an average user has little impact, from 1 to 7%. We also then evaluate the worst case scenario, where Edna constantly disguises and reveals the most expensive user with the most data. So this user has 1% of all the data of 16,000 users. We find a moderate impact up to 28% drop in throughput. And this impact occurs because the MySQL database that we run on appears to prioritize these disguising transactions over normal application operations in order to prevent the transactions from starving. This shows the upper bound on Edna's performance impacts when Edna runs these large disguising and revealing transactions continuously. And we imagine this to be an unusual scenario in practice. Disguises themselves have acceptable performance. On average, they take milliseconds. And worst case, disguises of the most expensive user take a couple seconds. We also investigated the scope of global database updates that Edna can support with reveal time update specifications. To measure this, we looked at the most recent 20 global database updates that the Lobster's developers had applied. This information is available in chronological order on the Lobster's open source GitHub repo. as schema migrations. 15% of the updates were data transformations and updated the contents of table data, like the moderation update that I showed earlier. So for example, in this update, which is in Ruby, fixes the formatting of moderation nodes. 75% of the updates were schema changes and updated the database table structure. So for example, this adds a column to one of the tables. Edna can support both of these updates, meaning that Edna can support 90% of the updates we looked at. So what's the other 10%? Well, the other 10% are unsupported because they rely on data external to the disguised data. In particular, this example updates comments based on the values in the votes table. Edna can't ensure that applying these updates during reveal time will produce correct results, since the external data may have changed. The developer has a couple choices if they perform such an unsupported update. If the update's correct, no matter what the current state of external data is, Edna can just perform the update during reveal time. Otherwise, Edna can notify the developer upon reveal and flag the data for them to update, or the developer could reapply the update as a periodic idempotent cron job. We also explored how difficult it would be to disguise and reveal without Edna, and how Edna could be combined with encrypted databases to protect even undisguised data against server compromise. And I'm happy to share these details after the talk if you'd like to know more. As ongoing work in Edna, we're looking into ways to extend disguised data. Applications might worry, for example, that Edna could cause them to hold lots of disguised data that they can't derive any value from. But perhaps with some initial setup and clever cryptography, Edna could allow some limited computation over disguised data. Or data could simply time out, and services could put garbage collection policies in place to collect this data after some number of years. And also, while Edna has been tested in some real-world applications, many web services can scale up to millions or even billions of users, like Facebook. They use distributed databases and replicate and shard their data. And because Edna's disguising and revealing transactions may touch many tables spread across multiple database servers, and at scale, Edna may receive many disguising requests per second, this might mean that Edna's transactions might need to be broken down into smaller ones or run in batches during low load times, like nighttime, in order to scale. Finally, disguised data might also be useful in settings that Edna does not address. The FunHusk project with Hannah, Malta, Franz, and Eddie explores this idea by investigating how to protect user data from insiders of a company. So just as Edna allows users to expose their data to the application only when they desire it or when necessary, perhaps the application can use disguising and revealing to flexibly expose user data to employees when they actually need and use it. Of course, there's also been existing work on deleting or securing data in web applications, and these lines of work also help move towards better data protections. Data deletion frameworks like Delph and K9DB focus on correct data removal, but the removed data is permanently gone and cannot be restored. Policy enforcement systems like CAPLA or Blockade prevent unauthorized users from accessing the data, but they don't protect the data from server compromise or from authorized users. And finally, encrypted databases like CryptDB and Mylar protect against database server compromise, but they leave the data still accessible to authorized users. Edna targets the separate problem of disguised data and can be combined with these systems. For example, we combine Edna with CryptDB to protect undisguised data, and Edna could use the techniques of data deletion frameworks to handle more complex ownership models, as done in K9DB. So to conclude, today I've discussed how privacy needs are nuanced and ever-changing, but services today provide only blunt privacy tools. In order to achieve this more flexible privacy, we need systems for privacy that work with existing real-world applications. And to achieve this, I've described the abstraction of disguised data, which enables systems like Edna that help users take back flexible control over their data's exposure and takes a first step towards a better internet that better reflects users' privacy needs. So before I take questions, I've been looking forward to this part for 6 years, which is when I finally get to thank all the people that made this possible. Because of time, I won't be able to thank literally everyone. So please check out the thesis for more details or ask me after the talk. So first, I'd like to thank my thesis committee, Franz, Malta, Eddie, and Nikolai. You've generously donated the time to help me succeed in this thesis and throughout my PhD. I'd also like to thank Hannah for your essential help with Etna and support along the way. So the best part about having COVID and Zoom meetings during my PhD was that I had the chance to take screenshots that I knew I would use years later today. So I've been so incredibly lucky to have Malta and Franz as my co-advisors. Thank you for always believing that I could do it and being there when I needed you. And of course, I have to thank Eddie, the one who got me into this whole research business to begin with, and who has never failed to give me a good reality check, sometimes with chickens. I'd also like to thank the other mentors and role models I've had, Stefan, Margot, Joel, Kim, Phil, Natasha, Peter, Miss Fagenbaum, all the way from high school. You were there to cheer me on in even the darkest and hardest times, and I cannot thank you enough. And I'm so glad to have shared not just research, but also adventures and my love of music with you all. I've also found incredible homes here at MIT. So with PDOS and the others on the 9th floor, who never fail to make me laugh, think harder, and be humbled. And ETOS, thanks to Malta and Julia and everyone in Providence, where they also have really good pizza. And I've also had fun in the European Club, which provided a very diverse and new experience. And the music community that I found playing with Valerie for sharing notes, the pop-up music initiative we started during my time here, and which also made us temporarily infamous on MIT Confessions. And now for the people who have always been in my life and to whom I owe everything, my family. So first, I must apologize to my parents for making them worry so much with all my choices, starting from climbing up to high places as a kid to actually rock climbing and then jumping into a PhD head first. I'm so glad to have had you here to both literally and figuratively support me. You've inspired me in so many ways and instilled in me a love of music, of reading, of learning. And I know I don't always show it, but I truly appreciate that you've always been there to catch me if I fall. I also want to thank my sister, Stephanie, for being the coolest ever and being my forever role model. And I can't forget my grandparents, Ama and Agong from both sides, whose wisdoms I hope to achieve when I grow older. Auntie Cecilia, Uncle Yasik, Jackie and Kenny, my relatives from my dad's side, and who I often visit in Vermont. Ai, Wei Jian, Wei Ken, Dwaku, and all my relatives in Malaysia. Can't wait to go on more adventures with you guys. And Auntie Sally, who's never forgotten a birthday or a Christmas in the past 29 years. And I'm sending a big hug your way. I also, as some of you may know, have come to love my family's outside of family. In particular, music and the friends that came along have carried me through the highs and lows of the PhD. In particular, I'd like to thank Valerie, Solin, Jen, Lisa, Lynn, Jessica, Mary Jane, Ken, and Alan. Thank you for always being down to play with me, inspiring me and teaching me so much about music and life, and reawakening my love of sight reading parties. I will miss you all very much. I must also acknowledge my climbing family, with Leica and Anders encouraging me to be bolder. My adventuring family, Rick, Bess, and Chris for sharing your love of the outdoors, and Whitney, John, and Oliver for encouraging me to be the strongest I've ever been. And also Hidemi for providing me with a home outside of home during the last 4 years. And last but not least, I am so, so grateful for the friends and community that have surrounded me with so much love and joy. And as Matt and Zach know well, I have a habit of taking awesome candid photos of my friends. That has finally paid off today. Thanks also to Matt for preventing me from adding even more animations to my slides and providing the black background color scheme that I stubbornly stuck to despite the advice of my advisors. So I owe all the fun moments in the past 6 years to my friends that I made here. In particular, I want to thank Serena for being the wisest friend I know. The world would be so much better if everyone were as awesome as you. You also make the best salmon and have the cutest ducky. And Lara, I'm still in awe at how you can climb so many mountains and walls and obstacles and still have such a great smile on your face. So to all the other friends I made here during my time at MIT, my PDOS friends, of course, Kevin, Karima, Leica, Hamish, Helena, Giannis, Samu, another Kevin, Anders. I've treasured our experiences together, and I look forward to many more, especially when you all move to California. And there are also the friends from years or decades before. You guys help me become a better person every day, and I still don't know why you're friends with me, but I'm very honored to have you in my life. Anita, you've known me so long that I just have to believe you when you say that I became more mature and mellow during the PhD, which is also probably why I finally made it to graduation. Yihei, I can't wait to hang out more in California. Ethan, you'll always sigh with me. Roberta, I'm grateful to have a friend who's down to adventure across the world. Henry, if you don't come to California, I'll be stuck playing duets with Daniel. And of course, thanks Daniel for listening to me butcher Haydn on piano and still playing with me and putting up with my incredible puns. Hanson, I'm amazed at your ability to work 20-hour days and still hang out. And I also thank James, Rob, Nikhil, Ashvin, Serena, Wentong, and Zach for bringing joy into even the toughest times during the PhD. And I have to do a special shout out to my longest friendship of over 20 years with Melissa. Somehow you've ended up close by to me in the past 6 years, and I couldn't be more grateful for you. Finally, I want to thank Benji for the light he has brought into my life. I can't wait for many more sunsets and sunrises to come. With that, I'd be more than happy to take questions, and thank you so much for coming today. I can also look at the Zoom chat.
The question is, fire off people with mini Chris shot.
Joel.
Yeah, so you talk about some of the limitations of, the database updates. I was
Yes.
curious whether there were any restrictions that arise because of interactions between different orders on, out of order reveals and database update. Is that?
Yes, I see what you mean. So database updates, in some ways you can think of them as pretty orthogonal to the actual composition of disguises, because you can either think of it as a structural change to the data or some like content change to the data. So even if you reveal out of order, the data in either case, so like say like you have disguise data from disguise 1 and disguise data from disguise 2, and then you reveal disguise 1 first. That data will be consistently updated with the data from disguise 2 so that they compose. It's just like you can imagine like lifting it to a second level, but they're on the same.
Even if there was correlation between the database update and the information in the two reveals and.
Oh, I see. So do you have a specific example in mind? Let's say that the update, this actually is a limitation to updates where if the update modifies, for example, the principal identifier in the row, then, well, you wouldn't be able to reveal in the first place because you wouldn't find the pseudo principal to correlate with. But yeah, we assume that the identifiers for pseudo principals remain constant so that we can use the speaks for chain to compose disguises. Yeah, so that is one condition in where they would conflict. Zoom, okay.
Very specific question, really great job, by the way. It was on slide 26.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to see though.
Oh, yeah, sorry. This one?
It was mine, like, yes. So like, if Bob disguises Bob, and Helen can still see the content in their chat, but now it's dissociated with Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, like, token that identifies the dissociated account persist across other, like, posts that were made by Bob? So Helen can see that those were also made by Bob, because she knows what that token is in their chat.
Ah, I see. So Helen actually doesn't, all Helen sees is that now my chat is some anonymous dog. Depending, I mean, so pseudo principles like throwaways can be used in various degrees of granularity. You would imagine that a shared message would have a different pseudo principle than like Bob's posts or comments. And so even if Helen knows, okay, this used to be Bob and is now anonymous dog, Helen can't go and search for anonymous dog through the whole application because Bob's other content might be owned by anonymous pig or anonymous fox. If I'm not sure that was the question.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood like the setup. Like, so if Bob like says anything, so he's making a specific like throwaway for his chat account, basically.
So in this case, I guess I wasn't so specific with the disguise, but this is a removal disguise.
Okay.
So it's as if I wanted to remove my lobster's account.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like if Bob kind of, I guess if he tags something with Helen with help, he
Mhm.
may for help.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about like that chain.
Yes. So Helen, in that case, so we don't protect against the actual like contents of like a post. So if I write in a post like my name is Lily, then we're not going to, that will identify me no matter what the pseudo principle is. So in this case, Helen would be able to figure out that the anonymous pig that owns that post, as well as the anonymous dog that owns this message are the same person because they have prior information. Casey, you have a question? Just kidding. So,
It's probably out of scope here, but have you thought at all about how this guy's data might stick around in the backups and logs and stuff like that, and how you might address that problem? Is there other reasons?
yeah, so that's sort of captured in the like copies of data. But if data is disguised and there is a backup made of it, it's simply encrypted and inaccessible unless somehow an adversary gets compromises a client and gets their key. So actually backing up the disguised data is not a problem. Probably an attacker could use an encrypted backup plus a plain text database to do a diff and try to figure out like which disguised data belongs to which principal. If there's a backup of undisguised data, and then the data is disguised in the database, then that backup will leak information. That's sort of like a screenshot. So, Derek.
I don't know the question or not, we have a comment in the chat.
Oh.
Regarding,
Regarding out of order reveals and updates, you have to merge the update logs, right? But the merge sections, merge the update logs. So yes, you can think of the updates as, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by merging, but yes, merge sections should be like basically deterministic because they don't rely on external data. So unless they modify content that actually messes with the like speaks for record data or pseudo principal identifiers, then it should merge correctly. I think that's
possible that I just misunderstood. So if it doesn't make any sense, pay no attention.
Thanks for the question.
It wasn't really, wasn't really a question, but okay.
Anita, maybe, and then Derek. Mm. Yeah, so basically when we reveal, so when you create two throwaways, basically we've made the choice in Edna that if you reveal even one of these throwaways, this post should still be disguised because this post has been disguised twice. So basically each post, each disguise adds a layer, and you can, even if you remove an middle layer, it should still be disguised by some like top layers. So that's a choice that we've made. You could also have a choice that you can disguise something a million times and the first reveal would reveal it entirely. But that's just the choice we made in this case, in which, in order to do that, we need to keep track of these layers, and that's the speaks for chain.
And now the baby is like another throwaway.
Yeah.
Could it be linked to the Bob?
So yes, pig could be linked to Bob, but if we did that, then if Bob revealed the pig, the budget throwaway, then Edna would just simply restore back to Bob and not the dog, right? Because the dog's an intermediate layer. So we need some way to trace what disguises have applied to the same data. And this speaks for chain is just one way of doing it. Yeah. Someone fight it out. No, just kidding. Derek.
This is much more open-ended
Uh-huh.
question. One of the cool things here is that like it's a really relevant problem today. Like we have a lot of user data and like we figure out what to do with it and we want to like exercise their anything over it. Has doing this project changed your views on kind of discussion about how we should regulate user data and things like web applications, social media platforms, et cetera?
So I think I think my views have gotten a bit, definitely more nuanced. I feel like oftentimes the debate of privacy, like you have the far, I don't want to say far left and far right privacy people, but like a lot of people that don't care at all, they're like, what do I have to hide? And a lot of other people that's like, I'm never going to use, Gmail. I'm going to only use a private web server that I run myself. I think I've just become more aware of the times where I'm willing to give, like I calculate the costs more in my head. So I know whenever I use an application, I know exactly what I'm getting out of it and I know exactly what I'm selling. So for example, I still use Facebook a lot to advertise events and things like that and connect with people. And I know what data I'm giving it, but at least I know, and I know that I'm getting some utility out of it. So I think it's just an increased awareness of that cost benefit because we are willing to pay for a lot of things, right? Because we get some benefit out of it. So I think that if everyone had an accurate kind of utility model of privacy versus functionality of the application that you're getting, then that would probably be a more balanced world than what we have today. Joel?
Fantastic talk. I was in the future work, and I know that's not the complete solution, but do you see Emma having any role to play in data portability?
So the question was about data portability and whether Edna can have a role in that. So data portability, if I'm recalling correctly, is basically whether you can take data of one application and move it into another application. And so this would be across applications that have the same functionality. So something like Mastodon and Twitter or something like that. I guess in some ways, the closest part of Edna that relates to that is this stuff about global database updates, because you can encrypt the data of a user, transform it, and upload it in the format of another application. I think the ways people have dealt with data portability have either get applications to agree on particular formats, or have some way to they have to provide a way to transform data into the format that another application uses. And both have like IP issues because companies don't want to give up how they're using data. That was sort of an aside. I guess, yeah, all I can say is that I think disguised data is strictly orthogonal to that, but it allows maybe a way to encrypt your data while moving it and then transform it into the other web applications. But it's still up to the company to provide those updates on how to transform it. Yeah, Sanjay.
Are there any applications for which Aetna wouldn't be good to?
So I think, well, off the top of my head, Edna, so the question was, is there any application that Edna would not be suitable for? An application that requires the user data to like where sensitive user data is actually necessary. So I don't know, I'm thinking banking applications, I guess, don't need your data all the time, but perhaps I think also it becomes a lot trickier in applications where basically I think I'm thinking like applications always use the user's data or like somehow always need it. Or like the user's data is essential for the application's functionality in some way. But I'm struggling to come up with some examples.
It's kind of like in filter blocking pattern, a lot of operations, like if the operation is like critical to the functionality of the application, you can't just apply it. Okay.
Yeah, so if a global database update is critical to the operation, and also if I'm a user and I want, for example, Google Photos to tell me like, so I can easily find photos of all my friends by facial recognition. Sorry, guys. Then I actually need to give it my data for an extended period of time because it runs its like, machine learning algorithms on it. So in that case, I'm getting really useful functionality from it. But I can't have my data disguised while I don't have the tab open because perhaps those computations wouldn't happen, or like I'm not willing to wait a week with it open for that processing to occur. So perhaps those type of use cases.
All right, let's think Lily one more time. And then to the open part of the piece defense, and then we'll move on with the.
That's fine.
closed part.
Cool. Thank you everyone for coming on Zoom. Yeah, feel free to send me comments and everything.